Okay, perfect. We've got quite a crowd already let into the room and probably some more coming in the next few minutes as we get everything rolling. Um, I'd like to get us started just so we can try to keep a good amount of time available for everyone to make their presentations this evening. But I'd like to start by saying good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining us today as we launch this first exhibition of 2021 with this series of lectures by each of the artists represented in the show. My name is Kyle Rudy Kolop, and I am the Executive Director here at Northern Clay Center. While I know many of the viewers are tuned in from different locations across Minnesota and the United States, I'd like to start today's program by respectfully acknowledging that Northern Clay Center is located on Dakota land. The reason we are gathered remotely today, the Emerging Artist Grant Recipients Exhibition has always been one of the most exciting annual events for me, as it allows our entire community the opportunity to celebrate emerging voices in the field of ceramics while providing a platform from which to receive the recognition of their achievements, launching point for the next steps in their careers as makers, and because it's NCC's first big event of the year. 2020 has presented all of us with an incredible array of difficult situations to navigate, atop of the struggles and challenges that all of us have come to encounter. These artists have pushed their limits to overcome temporary losses, studio access, delays with getting supplies, the development of new processes and techniques with the resources and tools available. The list goes on. Through it all, their individual dedication to carry forward and meet the goals has resulted in some truly amazing work and a stunning exhibition. While ongoing recommendations from local and national health authorities prevent us from hosting these lectures or the big reception in person, we're thrilled to be able to make everything available remotely. I will note that this presentation is being hosted on Zoom, but it is also being live streamed through NCC's Facebook account. So for any of you who are connected through Zoom, please be mindful that it's being live streamed. And if you would like to remain anonymous, you are going to be able to toggle your video off, so it's not no pictures being projected through that platform. These talks will soon be posted on NCC's YouTube channel, and in the very near future, the exhibition itself will be incorporated into our website as a 3D virtual tour. The physical installation is going to be open to the public if you're wanting to and able to get here for that in-person look. But I will note that our current protocols restrict capacity in the galleries to 2 individuals at a time. So we do recommend that you call ahead to our sales gallery to schedule an appointment in advance. This afternoon, we have a lineup of 7 presenters who will be sharing brief insights on their award years and the work that they created for the exhibition. With our goal to allow each of them an equal opportunity to talk about their work and experience, I'll ask everyone to keep a few things in mind. To minimize interference with the presentation, we're going to keep everyone muted for the duration of the meeting. Just before 5, we are going to break for an intermission that'll last about 10 minutes. But right before taking pause, I'll let everyone know what time we're going to resume, and there's going to be a slide projected with that time listed in central when we're going to get started with the next presenter. At the end of everything, we are going to open the floor for a Q&A session. So if you're sticking around, that'll be the opportunity to ask questions of the presenters. But you are going to be able to utilize the chat feature in Zoom. So feel free to post any questions in that chat lineup. And when we get to the end of the presentations, we'll read those questions to the presenters to allow them to answer any burning questions you have. All of us here at Northern Clay Center are incredibly grateful to have the opportunity to support emerging artists in the field, thanks to the generosity of those who believe in our mission to advance the ceramic arts through education, exhibitions, and artist services for artists, learners, and the community. Having seen the incredible impact that these awards have had on the lives and careers of grant program alumni, we look forward to continuing our work supporting these opportunities with those that make them possible. The Jerome Foundation has generously provided support for the Jerome Ceramic Artist Project grant since 1990. Their vision has kept this opportunity alive and relevant, guided by commitment to intersectionality and quality. This project grant has provided 3 artists annually with $6,000 to invest in the continued evolution of their practice. In 2021, with this exhibition, we're celebrating the recipients of the 2020 Jerome Ceramic Artist Project Grant. And those are Beck, Rita Panton, and Ginny Sims-Burchard. BISQUE stands for Believe, Include, Sustain, Question, Understand, and Evolve. BISQUE is also a metaphor for makers in the early stages of their development. Northern Clay Center is proud of this experimental residency program, and Donna will talk about her experience through this one, inspired by our desire to cultivate new voices within the field. As a community-based ceramic arts center, we're in a very unique position and have access to many artists in that pre-emerging state. We invited Donna to be the first BISQUE resident artist. Ron Lindy and Rob Ostrander make a generous annual gift to an individual who's pursuing a career in pottery or actively researching historic pottery methods as ambassadors for the Red Wing Collector Society Foundation. In conjunction with funds on behalf of the foundation, their contributions supported the practice of Emily Price as the 2020 Red Wing Collector Society Foundation Award recipient. Collectively, we got a long list here, so hold on for one moment. Rick and Maureen Cox, Cox Insurance Associates Incorporated, Continental Clay, and Smith Sharp Fire Brick Supply support one artist through the Fogelberg Studio Fellowship. This residency opportunity is one for emerging ceramic artists in the states of Minnesota and Wisconsin, whose work is functional, and those artists have a specific interest in the pursuit of a career in studio pottery. This program was previously supported through Soup It Up Incorporated, an organization committed to supporting the future of the Minneapolis community. During the 2019 and 2020 residency year, Chris Singewald was our Fogelberg Studio Fellowship recipient. Bringing the lineup home with us tonight, we have our 2019-2020 Anonymous Artist Studio Fellow, Nat Nicholson. This fellowship is awarded to emerging ceramic artists working in a functional, sculptural, or installation-based manner. The Anonymous Artist Studio Fellowship is made possible by generous contributions by several anonymous donors, as well as various secondary market sales at Northern Clay Center. Of that grouping of artists that are presenting, Donna, Chris, and Nat were all in residence for 1 year at Northern Clay Center, where they were able to develop their work and exchange both ideas and knowledge with other studio artists. As a part of these residency awards, each recipient was provided a furnished studio space with 24/7 access to our facilities, materials and firing stipend, as well as both professional development and enrichment opportunities through Northern Clay Center's education, exhibitions, and sales gallery programs. If you have questions about any of these award opportunities or about your own eligibility for the programs, please feel free to reach out to me at any time via phone or email. I'm more than happy to talk with you about those award programs and where might be a good fit for you if you're interested in applying. You can find my contact information on our website, which is northernclaycenter.org. And once again, my name is Kyle Rudy Kola. Okay, so getting started with the presentations that all of you signed in for. We're going to kick things off first with the recipients of the Jerome Ceramic Artist Project Grant. We'll go into a brief intermission after we hear from those 3 artists, but then we will return to hear from our BISQUE resident, the Red Wing Collector Society Foundation Award recipient, our Fogelberg Studio Fellowship resident, and finally our Anonymous Artist Studio Fellowship resident. Thank you all once again for tuning in this afternoon, and I hope you guys all enjoy the program. So from here, we will turn it over to Casey.
All right. Thank you, Kyle. I appreciate the introduction there. Can you hear me? Okay, perfect. So yeah, I'm Casey Beck, and I was one of the 2020 Jerome Ceramic Artist Project Grant recipients. And I took this to research a bit more into downfiring the soda kiln here at Northern Clay Center. And I wanted to learn a bit more about the interaction between the ceramic materials, soda glaze, and the atmosphere of the kiln as it's downfired. I wanted to develop some new clay bodies and utilize an oxygen probe to measure oxygen levels within the kiln as it's firing up and down in temperature. And I also wanted to put together a resource to share my findings and my research. So just to start out with, on what soda firing is, it's a process where sodium carbonate or soda ash is introduced into the kiln's atmosphere, and it's typically done at the peak temperature of the firing. And what it does is it's attracted to the silica within the clay bodies or within the slips, and it forms a glaze on the surface of the wares that you have inside the kiln. And you can see here on these plates here, there's the more gray areas, and those are the areas that have the more soda glaze on them. And then it also creates flashing where there's less soda glaze, but the clay body is kind of peeking through and changing different colors based on the content of the metal oxides in there in the clay body. I first got into about 5 years ago, and over this past year, I've really delved into downfiring the kiln with just the gas, air, and damper settings. So that's what this research is all based on here. And then downfiring is another process that I use, and downfiring is after you're done actually firing the kiln up to temperature. So everything is hot, it's vitrified, and at that point you're starting to fire the kiln down in temperature. So I'm continuing to put fuel into the kiln and control how the kiln is cooling and the rate at which it is, and also the atmosphere as it cools. So what that does is it kind of emphasizes the flame patterns in the soda firing. So you can see on this picture here, there's these distinct lines on it, and those are a key attribute to the down firing. So you can see the flashing and the gray or soda glazed area, and then there's those spots in between that are emphasized by that down firing as well. My understanding is that it's converting the metal oxides, particularly iron, into different states at different temperatures. And what that does is it produces a variety of colors. And another thing that it does is it promotes crystal growth in the surfaces. So the slower the cooling, the more crystals will grow in the surface, and that scatters the light a bit and creates a matte surface that you see. So a part of this grant for me was developing some new clay bodies. I've always used a clay slip on my clay body, but I've wanted to develop some clay bodies that didn't need that slip to produce the soda glaze and the flashing and the marks of the flame that I'm looking for. So I was kind of fortunate enough to get this grant right before or during COVID when it first hit here in Minnesota. And so I just kind of was able to sit at home and really dig into some research. And I was able to read Robert Tishane's book, Clay Bodies, and Gail Nichols' book, Soda, Clay, and Fire. And with that knowledge and the use of glazy.org, I formulated 28 initial clay bodies, which I tested in the soda kiln when things were a little easier going. And then I took those and I reformulated 5 of those clay bodies to delve a little deeper into what's going on. And you can see those 5 clay bodies here. I was kind of looking for, again, this flashing, and then also this soda glaze buildup, and then these areas in between where the flame really kind of paints its path on the pots. So there's the 5 clay bodies there. And then I came to this conclusion of this clay body that
Sorry, I'll give you my headphones in a sec.
that I was really interested in. It's my 33rd clay body that I've formulated, known as T33 in my notes. And what I really liked about this clay body was the depth within the soda glaze. So you can see on these pots here, there's these kind of frothy areas where there's a lot of soda glaze on them, and they're really muted and kind of matte. And then there's also a really nice painting of where the flame was. So there's all that flashing that is also happening, as well as all those areas in between those two. And another thing that I didn't really mean to get into, but I ended up looking into quite a bit, was water reduction. And I read about it and learned about it here and there, but I didn't know much about it, and there wasn't a lot of information about it. So I just kind of went for it. I just went for it, and what I did was I soaked soft brick in water, and then I put those wet soft brick pieces into the spray ports of the soda kiln as it was down firing. And what that did was it kind of steamed the kiln. And my understanding of that is that the steam, it expands and it creates a bit more pressure inside the kiln. And I've noticed that it creates a bit more of a homogeneous atmosphere. And it also, with that, promotes more these flame trails and a greater variation in the surface. So you can see these two pots on the right here, those were down fired with water, along with the natural gas and the air. And then the two pots on the left were fired in a very similar firing without water. So you can see the drastic differences that that brings to the pots there. And they're all fired very similarly and fired down to about 1600 degrees Fahrenheit over the course of about 6 hours. And another thing that I was kind of looking into and noticed in this research that I was doing was the development of surface and color during the down firing. So I was typically down firing the kiln to about 1600 degrees Fahrenheit. And I kind of wanted to see what it would do at, or how different lengths of time down firing to that temperature would change the surfaces. So the picture on the very left was down fired for 5 hours, and then 6, 7, and 8 hours with that garlic box on the right there. And I've noticed that there's a greater variation in colors the longer that the kiln is down fired for. And I'd attribute that to the metal oxides, again, within the clay bodies. They're kind of coming in and out of reduction, and they're changing states during that time. And so that's producing all these different colors that I'm seeing here. And I don't totally understand all of this quite yet, to be honest. There's a lot of stuff unknown, and there's a lot to know about this. And but I've noticed that the longer that they're down fired for, the more colors come out. And I've also noticed that the more reduced the down firing is, the more reds will come out in the flashing areas. And also the longer that they're down fired, I noticed that the surfaces turn a bit more matte. And again, that goes back to the crystal growth that's happening. And the pots that are down fired for a bit longer have these different crystal structures, and those are kind of scattering the light differently once the light hits it and showing a more matte surface. There we go. Another, or I guess a thing that's always been really important to me is recording data. So with each of my firings, I'm taking the firing log, and that contains like the temperature and the time and the settings and the oxygen levels of the kiln. And I'm putting that all into my lab notebook, and I'm taking the firing log and I'm graphing it out on the computer, and I'm writing notes about the firing and the post-firing surfaces that I'm seeing as well. So what the surfaces are, and I'm trying to attribute those to like what's going on inside of the kiln and trying to create a deeper understanding of that. And so I also take that and I analyze it among firings and try to pinpoint what what does what are these mechanisms that are at play in the development of the surfaces and the colors and the crystal growth and all that stuff there. And so I mentioned that I was looking into the levels of oxygen inside the kiln, and through this project grant, a big part of it was acquiring an oxygen probe. And this was something that I've been really interested in because it gives a set of data to the oxygen levels inside of the kiln. And what it does is it compares the ambient atmosphere versus the atmosphere within the kiln, which passes through the zirconium tip, and it creates a voltage differential read by the voltmeter. So in that picture on the right or on the left there, you can see the little red box that reads, that's the voltmeter that reads the differential, and then the oxygen probe is stuck inside the kiln. And this has actually really helped me in the upfiring. So as I fire the kiln up in temperature, it's helped me really fire it more efficiently. And that's given me more time to downfire the kiln. So I've been able to downfire it for 8 hours because of that, and really conserve my time and energy. I really wanted to see how it reads the data on the downfiring, but I've had a bit of trouble with the kiln I've been firing, trying to get a homogeneous atmosphere for the oxygen probe to get a good reading on that. So I'm still troubleshooting that. I've only been able to fire it twice, so I'm looking into other possibilities of utilizing that within the kiln. Another really important part of my research is dissertation. So everything that I've done, I've taken it and I've written about it on my website. And it's really important to me because there's not a lot of information out there on soda firing to begin with, compared to other ways of working with ceramic materials. So I'm hoping to create a broader understanding for this process. And my website really outlines the process that I use, the research that I've done for this grant, and some recipes that I've been working on. And it delves a lot deeper than what I'm talking about today. So if you want to really dig into what I'm doing, you can follow along at beckpots.com. But that kind of concludes this brief overview of the research that I've done here for the Jerome Ceramic Arts Project Grant. And I'm really thankful for Northern Clay Center for providing this opportunity and the support for me, and allowing me to fire the kilns there. And I know that this is just the beginning of the research, and I hope to continue looking into the interaction of the materials and soda glaze and downfiring. And I also really want to learn more about the water reduction and how that plays a role in the surfaces. And I really wanted to thank my partner, Laura Lusardi, for helping me understand the physics of the materials and the oxygen probe, Kyle for all the help throughout, and then Isaac, Howard, and Harry Levenstein for just having an open conversation about soda firing technically and conceptually. Really appreciate that. And if you want to follow along with my future research, you can follow me at beckpots on Instagram or beckpots.com, or feel free to reach out to my email, which I have right there. All right, thank you.
All right, thank you, Casey. We're gonna take a brief moment here to do a transfer, and we will next be hearing from Rita.
Thank you, Kyle, and the Jerome Foundation, and a huge thanks to the Northern Clay Center for this opportunity. I am delighted to be here, and I'm delighted to share my work with you. When preparing for this presentation, I imagined what people might be curious about. I'd like to think that my work mostly speaks for itself, but you may also have some questions like, just a minute, my slide is frozen. more questions. But you may also have some questions like, what was my grant proposal? Why are some of my sculptures upside down? Can I talk about unicycles and how they feature in my work? What did I eat for breakfast? I will answer these questions for you. Almost always for breakfast, I eat a bowl of oats. I drink a cup of black tea, and often I eat butter and toast with radishes. My proposal focused on stabilizing my making practice. This included building a studio space, acquiring my own kiln, and from there, exploring sculptural form as it emerges from drawing on a slab. As many of you may know, I took a hiatus from my clay practice when my son was born 7 years ago. Now that he's in grade school, I realized that I would have more personal time to make things in clay. This grant has supported me through the transition of making work again. I began my search for studio spaces and possible studio mates, and then COVID hit, and shared spaces were out. So I built a clay studio in our house. When I applied for the grant, I expected my son to be at school 6 hours a day. That's not how it worked out. I ordered a 1027 scut last spring, and as we have all become very used to the delays during COVID, it arrived September 9th, 3 months later. Nonetheless, it was an exhilarating feeling for all of us having a brand new kiln arrive in our backyard. I installed the kiln and venting in our basement, and I now have consistent and reliable workspace and equipment. Another surprising outcome of the grant was the bonus of my basement transforming into a much more ship-shape environment. Say hello to the shiny new attraction in our basement. I want to talk about drawing for a little bit, because drawing has become central to my practice as an artist. And my Jerome proposal focused on exploring the intersection of sculptural form and drawing. My drawings make their way into clay both spontaneously and by tracing paper transfer. I duplicate a lot of my drawing from my sketchbook and then impress it into a slab. My favorite drawing tool is to use a steel-tipped dart from the game of darts. My pieces are first constructed, then I brush on white slip, then I draw. I fire in oxidation to 1945 Fahrenheit. I call this wall piece Sheena the botanist in her stressless oasis. With thin strips of clay, I created this diorama greenhouse sort of space for the drawing to pop out from the slab. Here is the unicycle crew. It's 17 inches by 1.5 inches extending from the wall. Here I explored how the lines of the drawing could stick out from the slab as dimensional parts. As a visual, I'm attracted to a disproportionately round head that is maybe carrying lots of weight, a head full of thoughts, perhaps thinking too much, balancing on a circular object. You may be curious to hear why I like to use unicycles in my work. Well, my first attraction was when I learned how to ride unicycle in grade school Fayed. To my surprise, I got it right away, maybe because I'm tall. I love that unicycles are not commonly seen on the streets. There is a sense of surprise and glee when you see someone on a unicycle. I appreciate that unicycles emit confidence. Who rides a unicycle? Trying a unicycle takes courage. Even if the rider isn't sure, they look impressive unicycling about. They're doing it. Here's a piece I made, a piece made up of 9 small canvases. I call it, I'm Losing My Mind. I Am Too. I used to make ceramic drawings on small toast-sized plates. During this project, I started to build these Polaroid-sized clay canvases. I also used to collect grocery lists for years while I was baking at a co-op. Then I would draw what I imagined the person to look like who wrote the grocery list. This piece springs from that, although I was thinking of it more in the context of Zoom. We all look the way we do, but we may really be losing it inside. I took the title from a moment I had with this person on a walk on the river road. I like the feeling of I am too, or me too, the shared experience, and how we all hold each other up. I made this piece to recycle scraps that were piling up and to shake up my approach. I thought it would be funny to draw tiny narratives of camper vans and connect them in a landscape with decorative dividers. This is titled Camper Vans and Schoolies, and it deals with our desires to escape. I want my work to reflect how we collectively strive for balance. May it be balance between independence and being connected, nature and indoors, work and play, adventure and routine. I was a pastry chef for years before I went to art school, and I made wedding cakes. I often catch myself using similar decorating techniques like piping and repetition. My approach to hand building has a lot in common with the tactile nature of pastry work. I became interested in making smaller sculptures and exploring how they relate to the wall and how drawing relates to them. Both allowed me to investigate how can a figurative sculpture hang simply. This project grant has also allowed me to work large once again. The upside down figures are 3 or 4 feet in height. This one on the skateboard is one of my most recent. They express the balancing act of coping with states of mind. They aren't wobbly, but seem precarious. The tradition of illustration on antique vessels, such as Greek amphora, has inspired me to make these pieces. I explore the hyperbole of the vessel in ceramic terms. They share a large oval head instead of the pot's body. The foot is where the mouth or lip would be, the neck has become legs, and the head is where the foot of the pot would be. It seems fitting to revisit making these figures right now when the world is not how we know it. This is a 5-inch piece. I wanted to include it as an example of my drawing style. It consists of white slip, sgraffito lines, aqua underglaze, and clear glaze. The project grant allowed me to expand my underglaze color options. I became smitten by aqua, this coppery color underglaze, to complement the earthenware line. Last summer, life frequently felt overwhelming. The uncertainty of the election, sheltering in place, George Floyd, Black Lives Matter, protests, and violence. During these months, I was creating the leaners. I like the idea of 2 bodies leaning toward and on each other for support. The pair disproportionately become smaller in the direction of their toes. They balance remarkably well, but this was a challenging construction. The legs and body parts kept falling off, and to get their backs to lean against each other with such big heads, I had to keep rebuilding. I played with the surface, experimenting with texture while smoothing out coils. And my last slide is of a wall-mounted roller skater. This is a subject I really like to draw, and I was intrigued with the visual of the legs rolling away from each other. I spent a lot of time in the project experimenting with ways of how to hang a piece that has complicated geometry. This piece simply connects with the wall at the helmet and above the knee on the back of the leg. I'm really happy with this piece, and I look forward to making more work like it. I built a clay studio in my house. I bought a kiln, a really big deal. I experimented differently with gravity. I stabilized my work practice and discovered new ways of restarting my ceramics career. Thank you again to Northern Clay Center and the generous support of the Jerome Foundation. And thank you to our audience.
Wonderful. Thank you, Rita, for giving the talk. We'll be just one more moment here with another transfer to our next presenter, who is Ginny. We'll have her. Oh, she's on it. Look at us go. Let me get myself muted, and she is off to the races.
Hi, everyone. So for my project, I did a few things. I got a new website going, and so here's a few images of that, which was really exciting for me because it was a long time coming. And this way I was able to archive old work. And I put in this exciting new section called Sketchbook, and I'll show that to you in a second. But here's some images of the new website. So for many years, I've, of course, kept a sketchbook like you do. But my sketchbook, I feel, is a little bit different from a lot of people's sketchbooks, because I've always cut out images of just sort of anything that I thought would be inspiring. So it doesn't really necessarily relate to my artistic work immediately, but it's something that the images that I've collected are something that sort of relate to how I think, or what I think about, or something I'm attracted to. And so it was really kind of important for me to archive all this and have these books available to see. And it was, I think it turned out pretty well. So lots of collages, lots of images from magazines, lots of drawings, sketches, ideas for pots, and notes and things like that. Another big part of my project this year was to do a sculpture a day for the duration of the grant. So it ended up being about 100 sculptures in 100 days. And I should tell you a little bit about my background is that I work mostly functionally, make mostly functional pottery with this sort of installation component sometimes. And I have, and I do work with like figurative sculptures sometimes that are sort of like figurine style size, sort of reflective of my interest in 17th, 18th century Staffordshire factory ware. But this time I really wanted to do something different that with this 100 sculptures in 100 days was to really sort of let myself experiment, to get away from like the finished product and to kind of like maybe even move away from the figure and just kind of see what happened, like, and I was thinking like, when this idea, I've had it for a while, doing it's sort of like a diary, it's like reflective and a kind of poetic way to think about a year going by, kind of documenting it in clay. So a lot of these figures, or a lot of the work ended up being, or a lot of the work in the show, I should say, is figural because I did experiment quite a lot with making all kinds of objects when I'd go down in my studio. And for a while it felt, it would feel a little bit forced, and I mean, of course, that's like the discomfort part is part of it. But there was a week there, after the uprising. It's in my neighborhood. I was trying to sort of really reflect through the clay, like how this is affecting me, and how I would document it. And there was about a week there where I like sculpted fire, out of clay, and it just ended up not working out at all. And I didn't like the end result. And there were a few days like that where my actual feelings didn't really translate very well into the clay. And that's fine. And I learned a lot in that. What I did find, though, was with sketching these figures and kind of letting myself kind of stop short of completing them, how much like expression and emotion could come from their faces, or like an arm, for instance, or like this sort of piece kind of coming out of the, I guess, the seemingly what you would think would be a figure. And I really enjoyed that, and I thought it was really successful. And I also, while doing it, also thinking about like the color part, or like the decorative part, was really inspiring and fun, kept me going. So who are these people? Well, a lot of the times I get ideas from looking at like images of people who've inspired me, or there's often a art history reference. So from like left to right, here we have Marston Hartley. This is just a commuter. This is Kate LeBon. She's a contemporary English Welsh kind of rock and roll singer. You might hear her on Radio K. And an onlooker, and Georgia O'Keeffe. So it's just kind of a mishmash. And where that kind of came from was like trying to find ideas of like faces to get me going. And then you'd often, like, when you look up a person whose work you admire, I was sort of struck by how much their work kind of reflected, or at least resembled, their work, or their face reflected the work that they made. I thought that was really interesting. Or it's, sort of like how like a dog looks like its owner, kind of thing. And that would often be like, it could be, it kind of matches their personality, or it matches the sort of kind of sad life they've lived, whatever. And so that would be inspiration for me, and has been inspiration for me. Sometimes I just do like totally fictional people, just like sculpting and whatever turns out. But again, I was sort of struck by the expressiveness of some of these fictional characters. And so I really kind of let myself go with that for the duration of the grant. Trying to make sculpture for 100 days during a really hard year was hard. And I think these guys like kind of kept me company in a way. So I think that's what ended up happening. And then, so that's what's on view at the Northern Clay Center, is about 30 of the resulting sculptures. Some of them sort of fit together like families, some of them stand on their own. I think there's a little bit of a classical art, of course, element to some of these. I teach art history, so of course that creeps in. So here's some of the images. So this is Hannah Hoch, the Dada artist, German Dada artist, who was an example of, wow, you know, I love her work. And so I looked up her face and it was like, wow, she totally kind of matches her work. But it was fun to experiment with like rendering them in a way that I kind of how I thought of them, and also like take a Google image of them and kind of make it into clay. This here is just a little couple sitting on a bed. I thought it was pretty funny. And gosh, I think that might be it. Do I have a lot of time left? I don't even know.
Hey Ginny, this is Kyle. You're right at about 10 minutes. So if there's any, specific experiences or stories, feel free to add a little bit more. But if you're feeling that was a good summation, we're, that is up to you.
Okay. Let's see. Yeah. So, I mean, that is, I guess this is something I'm gonna continue doing. I guess to end the grant period is, it was really great to have this time to focus on working outside of my total comfort zone. And let's see. Yeah, I think all in all, being able to kind of purposefully let yourself be spontaneous in working is it was really a good project for me, especially since I make work, to sell for a living. And, there hasn't been in a few years anyway, like an opportunity to do some experimenting like this. So I'm really grateful for it. And I look forward to y'all's questions at the end.
All right. Well, thank you, Ginny, for tuning in and giving the presentation. As I mentioned when we got started, we're going to break for a short intermission here. We're going to come back at 4:55, so just 5 minutes if you need a snack or a restroom break. I'm going to put a little placeholder slide up here with that restart time. So make any brief trips you need to, and we will see everyone back in just a few minutes. It'll be just one moment here while we get the next presenter all set, and I'm gonna get the screen share started. We're doing some in-person and some remote connected in. Let's see here, portion. Wonderful. There we go. So our next presenter, as everyone can see here, is Donna Ray, who was our BISQUE resident in this last year.
Hear me? They can hear me? All right, I am the BISQUE resident, and I had a great time being the BISQUE resident. I want to thank Northern Clay and everybody at Northern Clay for welcoming me from the community to be with them in a group setting. This is my first time as being in a group setting, and I had a wonderful time with the Men Nice and the rest of the artists that were in the Northern Clay Center. And I really had a great time being in my studio space with Chris Salas and working with Riley Lawrence from Men Nice. I had the year to explore and because primarily I'm a builder, and I did a lot of my work at artistry, and I had participated in gallery shows, but I had never really had the free opportunity to build what I want to build the way I wanted to build it, and to experiment with different bodies of clay and firing techniques. Because I had done raku before and had did gas kiln at artistry and had been by myself solo, but never with a group. So I had the chance and opportunity to really sit back and make things from reclaimed clay. But I started out using making cameos first. And the cameos were my theme, and my cameos were about the ecosystem of where we live and about my ancestry. And from those cameos came the real thing, which was baskets and anything associated with baskets, because baskets are a part of the trees that are grown in the earth. And the earth is the cameos. So the cameos to me represent the earth. So once I started my process, I started working on round disc cameos. And those round disc cameos, I would have different continents on them, like Brazil and Africa and the United States, which is mostly of my ancestors. And then I would, from that, and I use the body of clay of raku clay, which is something I'm familiar with, which is the clay that I used to use in artistry a lot to do raku firing. So from there, I started using the clay that was in the bay here at Northern Clay, because I used all materials that was here to make any projects that I made. And I used reclaimed clay to make baskets, all kinds of baskets. And then I would make jewelry and everything I thought I wanted to make. I made well over 100 pieces of art when I was here in the beginning. Matter of fact, I made so much stuff that I didn't really start firing anything until like after COVID hit, which was a real shocker. So I actually enjoy making sculptures too. And
You got Bianca on the screen.
so Bianca is made not from reclaimed clay, but from stoneware clay. And she was featured in a Foot in the Door show. And Bianca is a sculpture, because I usually do make a lot of sculptures, except this is a sculpture puzzle. I came up with a new phenomenon because I wanted people to be able to play this game of reading the things around Bianca. And Bianca is the metal rat, in honor of the metal rat, because I am a metal rat. And if anybody knows anything about the Chinese zodiac, this will not be around for 60 years. I'll be gone from this earth. So Bianca is a historical piece of art as well. And she also has pieces of my family and like my son's initials and my granddaughter's initials, and also things about the rescue rangers, which is Bianca Mouse. I never liked Minnie Mouse. So that's why my character is Bianca. And she's also wearing a basket on her head. And she's also wearing basket for pattern on her shawl. And then she basically was she's a movie star. So that's Bianca. You're the metal rat. And it also pays homage to me being here as the BISQUE resident, because when you read Bianca on the bottom of her, it says different things about me, the artist, and about being BISQUE resident here too.
Right now we have the Creole fishing basket up.
And we got a Creole fishing basket, which everybody, well, a lot of people may not know what a Creole fishing basket is. It's CREEL. And what people do is they take the basket out and they go fishing. And no matter where you live, whether it's Switzerland, Finland, United States, New Orleans, California, they use some form of Creole basket to go fishing. Even in Brazil, they would take the basket, put it in the water, and it had like netting in it, and they would put the fish in it, and then they put the top down, and it had straps on the side of it. And that was a basket that was made out of bee clay. And I used the glazes that I liked, that I can see. As a person that is blind, I can only see too dark and light. So the glaze that I used for this one was the Tomoka. And then I used Rhodes White to produce those colors. And then it has a dragonfly on it for the handle part of it. So it has 4 sides to it, and you could also put a strap on it. So I actually love that basket. It was one of the last pieces that I made. And then
this cameo has North America and Africa on it.
And this was one of the first ones that I made, or maybe this was the second one that I made. It's North America and Africa. And it might be talking about the going back, but I'm not really sure if it's the water or if it's the one with the Native American and African woman. Because if it's the one with the Native American and African woman, it talks about Native Americans marrying African American people and the cultures of mixing and intermixing with each other. And it has an eagle for the American eagle that we have a bird, which is what they talk about, the American bird for the United States. And Native American and African American people have built a lot of things in the United States, and that's part of my heritage, and to recognize that.
All right, and next up here, we have the Gullah basket.
Now, I have the Gullah basket. The Gullah basket was a project that I liked because it talks about the Gullah people. And it also talks about the basket making history of them using the tree limbs and tree branches to make the Gullah baskets design, herb basket. It's an herb basket. So this herb basket would be where they would carry their herbs and have their rice. And I made it, have it where it had a little mortar and pestle to it, as well as a little serving bowl to it. So actually, when you look around it, it was painted with yellow soda and fired at cone 10. Because I also did I like firing, a lot of experimenting. The whole time I was here, I experimented the entire time. And I love making this basket because it has 5 pieces to it.
Okay, and on the screen now we have the full image of Krampus.
Okay, Krampus. And is this Krampus' face or what?
His front side.
Oh, Krampus is about the Christmas goat that is celebrated in Minnesota. And I heard about it from I listened to a lot of conversations that people have about their heritage here in Minnesota, because I'm not from Minnesota. And they would talk about Krampus and about how all the kids loved him and how it's the Eastern European celebration, how Krampus would take all the bad kids away. And then for Saint Nick, if they were bad. And then actually this is a baby Krampus, because my baby Krampus has a basket on him. He has a basket that's out of yellow soda, and this is the only soda-fired piece that I actually have in the show, because that was the only soda firing, well, actually it was the second soda firing experience I had, but the Krampus is yellow soda, and he has black stain on him, a gold eye, and rutiel chains, because Krampus usually has chains and bells associated with him as well. His head comes off. He's actually a jar, and the basket is an area where you can put candy and stuff. But this was a happy Krampus of baby style before he grew up.
And this is a close-up of the basket and the front side that we're looking at.
Oh, Krampus's basket. Krampus's basket is yellow soda, and I built it within the piece. I sculptured it within the body. So he has a full body, actually, where he has this basket in the middle of his chest. And then he has this top part. And then what is?
All right, and next is the tapers basket and tapas bowls.
Okay, topper bass. These were red clay experiment. I like working with the red clay because I could make all different kinds of colors. And I also made a taper basket with 2 different bodies of clay, which is something that people usually do not do, but I did it anyway because I wanted to know if it was going to work. So I put red clay and B clay together. And then I know that when you do that, you have to fire for the low clay, which is the red clay. And then I used the stains from the red clay to cover the whole basket for that particular piece. But it was exciting and I loved it. It's an Asian taper basket.
And then the B clay peacock's dry base.
Okay, this piece was better before it got fired to me. This is the B clay, and it was peacocks, 2 peacocks. I used the bee clay, and I also used the stoneware brown clay to make the different types of leaves and stuff around the peacocks. And I did not like the way the clear set on it, but I did like it before it got fired. I liked it more before it got fired than after it got fired. But it's a dry basket where you put your herbs in, because people were known to take dry baskets and put them inside of other baskets and collect herbs and stuff when they were out in the fields, and then have the herbs sitting, separate the herbs that they were going to use to cook with would come through the two small sections of the dry basket top, and that would be the herbs they used to cook meals with.
Right. And then next we have the mortar and pestle, and then the spoon and bird rest.
Okay, mortar and pestles that I made. I made these mortar and pestles out of birds because they are part of a zip code project that I have. And then the other one is the spoon rest, because I think you can use spoon rest everything and everywhere in your house. They all have basket patterns on their body, because feathers, sometimes you can make them look like baskets too. And even when I did the spoon rest, there's some type of basket pattern within them, because I like working with baskets.
And the last image we have is message in a bottle.
And message in the bottle, that was my staycation project. That staycation project is what I did during COVID. And it was also, I was awarded a mini grant from Forecast. I started doing a lot of grant writing and stuff and I got really stressed when the studio closed down. And I built this one at home. And I was very nervous about message in the bottle because I had won the grant. And I said that I was going to be building this grant and collecting these letters, which I still collect letters for this bottle. And this bottle is still in progress, and probably will be in progress for the next, as long as COVID exists. So people are still sending me letters, and I'm getting ready to extend it to where it goes nationwide instead of just to the state of Minnesota. Message in the bottle has a bird on the top of it. And that's part of my theme of staying with the baskets with the message in the bottle was because I couldn't make cameo at home because I couldn't figure out how I was going to transport a round oval cameo at home, and I had left them in the studio. I came up with the bottle idea as being a round cameo. It has basket patterns around it. It has the basket where the bird sits in. In the end, it's going to be more embellished. The top comes off a message in the bottle. Message in the bottle takes messages from everybody around the state of Minnesota, and it continues to get messages today. It's a project that keeps giving, basically. And I liked it because it made me be a little bit more outgoing with community, working more, and made me not be so lonely and isolated about being kept out of the studio. Because it was like a very stressful thing that happened to be locked out of the studio. So I started really figuring out ways to be more active in the community and being relevant. To remain relevant is the most important thing that any artist can do right now during this COVID. And this message in the bottle helped me stay relevant and helped me stay alive. And then it made me think of other projects like the Zip Code Project, which is the brother to the message in the bottle. And it also helped me remember that I had an art community, which is Northern Clay and the rest of the state of Minnesota, which we are full of artists. And it just kept me alive, and it keeps me alive every day. Because I still have message in the bottle, and I'm still working on message in the bottle, because this is one that I have to keep online all the time. And people, when they go to Bing, they can see message in bottle. Or go to Google Docs, they can see message in the bottle, forecast, Walker, and a whole bunch of other things that happened during COVID from message in the bottle. Me continuously doing outreach has made it where I have a lot of followers now. So I have to keep working on message in the bottle. And the Zip Code Project. That's the story of my life now. But I'm happy because now I'm making more friends as an artist. I'm learning about how to build and use different clay bodies. I'm learning about different firing techniques. I'm learning how to do projects and be active and just be relevant. And I love my whole experience of being BISQUE. And I think I will always be BISQUE. And I just liked meeting everybody too. And this Minnesota being an artist here is the best thing that ever happened to me. Even meeting Casey and Chris. Well, Chris, we knew Chris from artistry, but I also pay a lot of respect to Chris because he and David Swenson encouraged me to move forward. Even though I was a little bit shy about coming in a group setting, I felt better after I got here because I realized just how home it was for me and how much I can learn. And never heard so many kilns, so many paints, so many paint bays, men nice. Everything was good. The men nice experience was really good because I got to meet Riley and Chris. And then I got to learning about testing of the tiles before you make a decision about the paint. Because even though I can't see the colors, they would tell me about the test tiles and about what happens when they do the test tiles and about what color it would come out on which body of clay. And then the firing, sometimes Casey and them would talk about the firing and just sitting back listening to the conversations about everything helped me be a better artist. And I am very thankful to Northern Clay and everybody.
All right, we were glad to have you and glad that you're still in the studio with us.
Yes.
All right, we are going to be just one quick moment. We've got to physically swap chairs, but in just a minute, we'll have Emily beginning her presentation. Great, bring it in. We've got sound and video. Like I said just there, when you're good to go.
I just wanted to start off by saying a big thank you to Northern Clay Center as well as the Red Wing Collectors Society Foundation for the recognition and the support. This was totally unexpected for me, but it really couldn't have come at a better time. Preparation for the current exhibition has really given me something to focus my energy on in a year that, you know, has really pummeled all of us. It would have been easy for me to convince myself that spending time on my art or focusing on my art wasn't worth my energies. So this redirection every day back to my studio to focus on something that has been healthy for me and maintaining me throughout the year has been a gift. I was in my studio working on these two pieces when Kyle called me and told me I was being given this opportunity. So big thank you. My training is as a pharmacist. I'm a board certified pediatric pharmacist and I work in pediatric critical care. I have always been pulled towards art and clay in particular, but my pursuit of a pharmacy career has not allowed really any time for training in any other field. The boundaries that exist between practices of art and the practice of science have always felt frustratingly rigid for me. The message being sent that if you're serious about one discipline, you can't possibly be serious about the other. Despite my own willingness to kind of burn at both ends, my pursuit of my pharmacy degree has prevented me from any real post-secondary training in art at all. I have had one semester of introductory ceramics and one semester of intro to drawing. My first experience with ceramics was in high school. Art Nordstrom was my art teacher for one semester. Even though I was only in his classroom for one semester, the impact that he had on me was just monumental. He taught me how to throw pots, but he also introduced me to the Great River Road Artist Coalition. His work was the first illustrated pottery that I had ever encountered. He would identify as a painter, but I always saw him as a ceramic artist. By going to GRAC meetings with him and meeting working artists, and having them welcome me to their community and kind of adopt me, it really sparked a fire for art and a belief that being an artist was a capable goal, a reachable goal. And even though, like I said, I didn't have opportunity to do art training after that formally, I never forgot those experiences or those people or that organization. Wasn't till about 10 years later that I had the opportunity to take an art class. I was a third-year pharmacy student and I didn't have enough humanities credits to complete my doctorate. And I totally lucked into an intro to ceramics class with Tom Lane at the University of Minnesota. I don't think anybody at the university really had any idea how much time a studio art class was going to demand of me while I was still working on my professional degree, but I didn't care at all. I loved every sleepless minute of that semester. It really introduced me to this kind of duality in myself that I absolutely required, both my healthcare and science experiences, but art to feel complete. And that concept of duality, that feeling of kind of a split personality, has been with me ever since. After I finished professional school, I kind of floundered around for a while. I tried to get back into school. I took a random drawing class at the university. I did some international volunteering, tried different pharmacist roles within the hospital, trying to figure out where I fit. I was in a really uncentered headspace and I was yearning for an artistic outlet of some sort when I stumbled across NCC. I started taking classes from Lucy Yorst in 2013. And originally I chose her class because it was in the morning and I was working 10-hour evening shifts in the emergency department, and it was the only class I could get to consistently. But that turned out to be a fabulous match for me. Lucy loved my enthusiasm and totally supported me in my need to try everything. And I can't thank her enough for the encouragement that she gave me to just do my own thing, and that was okay. I was in the studio here at Northern Clay Center working on this lidded jar with a fish on top. And I wanted a little something just to make the fish seem more real. I took a quick break from the studio and ran out to Continental Clay and I bought my first bottle of underglaze. This was late winter of 2016. And it was kind of at that moment that everything changed for me in my ceramics making. Pots became functional canvases, and I became thoroughly obsessed with the idea of putting images on the surfaces and honing that skill and that technique. It took about 2 years of trial and error before I felt confident enough to start putting my work out there into the world. I had a totally uncharacteristic moment of courage, and I put this piece, or submit this piece to a competition in the Ceramics Monthly annual contest, and it ended up being featured in the Drink Up feature in the fall of 2018. That feature led to an invitation to write an article for Pottery Making Illustrated about my process, which then became a social media takeover day for the Ceramic Art Network. And all of that was just overwhelming and flattering and fantastic, but I felt like a total imposter because I was still just a student here at Northern Clay Center with no studio of my own, trying to squeeze my entire practice into open studio hours here at NCC while I was still working full-time as a critical care pharmacist. As my article was going to print in December of 2018, I decided that I had developed enough control over the medium to try and give my pieces a voice, kind of have a visual language of their own. I spent the entire winter working on this one piece, Tea with Margaret. I'd researched Margaret Sanger and her contributions to women's rights, and I was attempting to process the complexity of all the information that I had encountered. And this piece is the physical manifestation of that processing. This was also the first time I experimented with my own florography. The plants that I chose for this piece were not chosen because of their symbolism or their place in mythology. They were chosen because of their pharmacologic properties and their historical use in herbal medicine. When Kyle called me to tell me that this opportunity had been given to me, I was elbow deep in setting up my own home studio. This was right after the initial lockdown in March. I was changing everything. I was switching to mid-range porcelain. I was trying not to destroy the plumbing in my house, trying to come up with equipment so that I could make it home. But this opportunity or this award has really given me a huge boost to getting everything I need to make at home. And for some reason, this next slide refuses to download the images that I put in it. But knowing that I had this exhibition to prepare for, I changed the way I was making almost completely. I started practicing with hand building as opposed to throwing. I was doing press molding. I made over 100 test tiles to try and understand the underglaze palette that was available to me at this new temperature I was firing at. I was using colored clays, trying to come up with some kind of global idea of what I was going to do for the project. I did a lot of test painting, trying to figure out how the colors were going to behave, how they were going to interact with one another, how much density I needed in the color depositing to get the intensity I wanted in the finished product, but also to not cause problems with like boiling or bubbling blisters in the underglaze. It's actually a really tricky balance to achieve, a lot of trial and error. Ultimately, I chose to create forms that feel as at home in the kitchen as they do in an historic apothecary. As a female and a pharmacist, these objects are my tools, but they're also like an extension of my body. I feel really connected to women in history who had knowledge of plants and how they could be used to heal or to harm. The plants I chose for the work for the show are all recognized as potentially helpful healing pharmaceuticals. They also have significant toxicity, still kind of playing on that duality. When you're studying pharmacology, one of the first things that you learn is that everything is potentially toxic and the poison is in the dose. The dual properties in these plants speak to the dual natures within myself. The women who wielded these plants were healers, but they were also persecuted. because they were outsiders and people didn't understand the power that they had. So I try and carry through imagery that calls on both of those aspects, as well as toys with the superstition and the acknowledgement of science. In late November of this past year, there was research that was published, and I was painting datura flowers when I stumbled across this research in National Geographic. And I had this feeling that I had tapped into just exactly the vein of history and ideas that I was searching for. There's a cave in Northern California that's known as Pinwheel Cave because of these pinwheel shaped images that are painted on the walls. Those paintings are attributed to the Chumash people who were in those caves about 400 years ago. The researchers had discovered these wads of chewed plant material called quids stuffed into the crevices around the images. And they were trying to extract human DNA from these quids. They weren't able to get any human DNA to learn more about the people, but they did determine that hyoscyamine and scopolamine, two pharmaceuticals that we use in medicine today, but that are also recognized as highly toxic and potentially fatal if used incorrectly, were present in those quids, and they were able to show that those substances had been provided by the datura plant. Listening or reading about the modern descendants of the Chumash people and what these plants represented to them, and the fact that these plants are current pharmaceuticals, but were also being used in a very advanced way to facilitate visions and ritual. It was the connection that I was looking for, and it became very tangible. And it was really exciting to me and pointed me to this knowledge that I had started down the right path. And I plan to continue exploring that path. So I'm super excited that I get to share the work with you all here. So thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. I'm going to do a quick stop on the screen share. Next up, we have Chris Singewald, who will connect in with his screen share, and then one more. Nat will present right after Chris. Sorry, Chris, unmute really quick. But I noticed right away.
Am I on now? All right, the only thing that could have gone wrong did. Hello, my name is Chris Singewald, and I'm a functional potter living in Minneapolis, and I am the recipient of the 2019 Fogelberg Studio Fellowship. I wanted to thank Northern Clay Center staff, NCC's board, and donors for the opportunity to be a studio artist at Northern Clay Center during this one-year residency. Thank you for the opportunity to present today. Also, I wanted to thank Northern Clay Center staff for their safety guidelines and procedures during COVID-19 and during the demonstrations and uprisings following the murder of George Floyd. By the end of this presentation, I hope you have an understanding of why I make pots and how this residency helped me develop my work and ideas in the studio, as well as advance my professional goals. Primarily, I use stoneware clay, but I do use porcelain from time to time. During this residency, I explored different types of stoneware clay to see how my glaze palette would change. I always consider the potential of the final surfaces of my pots. As I begin my making process at the potter's wheel, I'm thinking about forms that will benefit the most from either wood firing or soda firing. I concentrate and explore forms that are going to interact with the glazes I choose and the atmosphere of my final firing processes. Often I will add ridges and edge to the profile of my pots, as well as adding gesture marks to increase the interaction between form, glaze, and atmospheric effects in the glaze firing process. This cup was fired in a kiln that was only fueled by wood. It was fired for multiple days, during which natural ash from the wood landed on pieces throughout the kiln, eventually melting into the glaze of the pieces and moving with the form. Because of this firing process, each side of the cup is different and unique. Ash and surface flashing from the firing process, combined with my functional forms that emphasize edge and gesture, create surfaces that intrigue me to continue to explore and make in my studio practice. I also utilize soda firing for the same reasons. Edges are highlighted with soda ash. Surface variation occurs based on loading and placement in the kiln. These are two porcelain mugs that are about 4 inches tall and 5 inches wide. The image on the left is one side of each mug, and the image on the right is the opposite sides of each mug. So there's a lot of variation in the firing process that I use. Here are 2 cups and 2 mugs. They were fired in the same wood kiln. The yellow and the brown glazed pieces have the same glaze applied to them, and the dark red and red orange pieces are the same glaze as well. The variations include 2 different clays that were used, 1 type of clay for the cups, 1 type for the mugs, and placement throughout the kiln. So there's a lot of variation in the things that I do. These are the things that I'm really interested in. During the residency, I was able to revisit unresolved ideas and improve forms. It had been a couple of years since I've created baskets, and recently I was introduced to new building techniques for baskets. They were sparked by a workshop that I assisted with Susie Lindsay. She was leading the workshop at Haystack Mountain School of Craft in Deer Isle, Maine. My previous baskets were thrown on the potter's wheel, and they had thicker handles, which would cause the forms to oval in the firing process. I liked the change in shape, but I wanted it to be more intentional. I changed my making process. I threw cylinders without bottoms, changed the forms by ovaling them when they were in the leather hard state, and then attached a slab bottom and a handle. The thicker handle is needed so that it wouldn't warp in the firing process. In order to secure the handle to the form, I folded over the rim of the cylinder and created a hollow rim, which added additional surface area to the attachment point of the handles and the basket form. I still emphasize edged in the form and in the handles. The left basket was created at the beginning of my residency, and it was wood fired in an Onagama style kiln for multiple days. The image on the right was another basket that I made towards the middle and end of my residency, and it was soda fired. When designing my forms, I consider volume and interior volume of my pieces as well. I don't want my pots to feel restricted or appear heavy because of their quote unquote posture. I learned about the importance of form and volume during my apprenticeship with Chris Guston. This is a utensil holder that also has a hollowed rim, which adds to the volume all the way to the top of the piece. This is the same utensil holder, it's just 2 different views, a front and a back, and it's just that much variation because it's kind of squared off, and there's, depending on where the piece was loaded in the kiln, there can be a lot of variation. With the generous studio space provided by the residency, I was able to work on larger serving dishes and platters. This serving dish was created with a black stoneware clay that I did not want to necessarily mask with the glaze. I chose to wax resist a circle in the inside of the serving dish to reveal the stoneware, and it also kind of complements the glazed surface too. This piece is about 12 inches wide. Here's a wood-fired platter with lines and ridges on the interior. It's about 15 inches wide. Since the form is low and wide, oftentimes wood ash covers all of the glaze on the inside of the piece. This created an opportunity for variation. In order to change the wood ash surface, a smaller piece was stacked inside of the platter with wadding material and shells to separate the two pieces. This changed the flow of the fire and ash during or around the platter's interior. It revealed a portion of the Shino glaze surface and the shell marks imprinted on the platter. I continue to evolve my forms, including pitchers, batter bowls, and spoon rests. Each of these forms have spouts, but each spout is nuanced based on its form and function. Here are two pitchers I made during the residency. The left pitcher was made later in the residency and is a little bit larger. It's about 10 inches in height. I used more clay on the handle because it was a larger form. The piece on the right with the mug is closer to 8 inches tall and was created at Haystack Mountain School of Craft just before the start of my residency. You can see I place the edge on my forms in different ways just to try to emphasize different parts of the picture. Sometimes it's throughout the belly of the piece, or maybe I put a couple lines together to draw people's eyes throughout the piece. Here's a batter bowl or a mixing bowl. I started making these after making pictures for many years. I wanted to continue to practice making spouts, but I needed to change the form just for variety's sake. So I made batter bowls and eventually added handles, then eventually figured out that knob handles were actually even better. Since the materials that people mix in batter bowls are thicker, spouts have to be wider on the batter bowls, wider than the pitchers. This is the same batter bowl, just one side and then the other. This was fired in a soda kiln, and it was made out of a stoneware clay. The variation that you guys see on the left is because it was in a spot in the kiln that I didn't realize would oxidize, and it brought this whole different surface flashing to the piece. It was one of the last kilns I fired in the residency. I was really happy with it. And it's pretty interesting to see both sides of it. They look like completely different pieces. Let's see. This is a spoon rest. I started making this form after a friend asked me for years if I made spoon rests. And actually in 2018, one of my New Year's resolutions was to make more intentional spoon rests. After seeing so many potters at art fairs that made spoon rests that look like afterthoughts, I wanted to make some really nice spoon rests. I actually do pull and form a spout that's even wider than the batter bowl spout. This also had a cup stacked inside of it during a wood firing, similar to the platter that I showed previously, and it gave a wonderful opportunity for surface variation. These are a few more smaller items that I made during my time at Northern Clay Center. And I thought I would also talk about some of my influences for surface. I draw influence for the surface of my stoneware pieces from objects that withstand weathering over time. I appreciate the 4 distinct seasons that we have in Minnesota, and I'm interested in the transitions between those seasons. To see objects, either man-made or in nature, really go through these seasons and change over time interests me. I lived in Massachusetts for almost 3 years and was always looking at objects along the ocean shoreline. This is also one of the many reasons I enjoy anytime that I'm able to go out to Maine to Haystack. It's located on an island, and the architecture of the school works within the natural land and shoreline of the island. being in Minneapolis, I really like to see old buildings with old advertisements painted on the bricks, and they tend to catch my eye. I'm really drawn to the layering and the hidden records of these signs that kind of give a past history of the building that you might not know of in the state that it is today. This is the last series of pieces I made during my residency. They were larger vase forms. I created one single object by throwing 2 pieces of clay and combining them in a leather hard state. While I was constructing them, they were between 20 and 22 inches tall, and after they were fired, they were 17 inches. I have built with this technique, but on a smaller scale. So the residency gave me this space to create and experiment with it, and I was able to do a series of these. Again, this one was created with that black clay, and it's the yellow glaze that you have seen previously in my presentation, but it gets really dark depending on how it was fired and where it was fired in the kiln. And this is just one of the vases with a detail shot. This is a second one from the series. In addition to making pieces and prioritizing my studio work, this residency allowed me to seek out new opportunities to sell my work. I was invited to sell wares for a second year at the Western Wisconsin Pottery Tour, an annual event that occurs at the end of September. But this year it was transformed into an online sale. It pushed me to create an online shop so I could jump into the online market. Also, when Northern Clay Center had to close the studio temporarily due to COVID, my wife Audra and I were able to finish our basement studio at home. We have been working on the project slowly for 2 years with the help of dear family and wonderful friends. And in April 2020, we completed it. I want to thank my wife Audra, who's currently taking care of our puppy right now, for all of her support, inspiration, and second opinions throughout my residency. Thank you for listening, and I hope you enjoyed my presentation.
All right, thank you, Chris. Okay, I'm gonna make one last transition for a screen share from the library here. There we go. Okay, wonderful. Got the video, the mic, and next up here is Nat Nicholson.
Thanks, Kyle. Thanks, everyone who's presented so far. It was really great to hear about all the stuff you guys have been working on. So I'm Nat. My presentation's kind of split into 2 sections. In the first part, I'm going to be kind of just talking about some of like my work, and then in the second part, I'll be talking about some like local arts efforts that I was involved with this past summer. So just a little introduction on my like I guess clay practice. It really got more serious about sculptures during my undergrad, and I was at the University of Iowa, and there's an image there, and so I had a great time with that program. And if you're familiar, if you ever get the chance to like check out the program, definitely recommend it. And then I was like super surprised and thankful when I got the residency at the Clay Center and moved up to Minneapolis. And here are a couple examples of some of the work I was making right at the end of my time at U Iowa. That image on the left there was like really the sort of beginning of my use of this like new sort of, or at least new to me, building technique, which I'll get into a little bit more later. And then that image on the right is yeah, just another example of work that I was making that sort of like combines like multiple sculptures into one, which I've explored a lot since then. And then just a couple more examples of some of the work I was making in a more like formalized setting at Iowa, some exhibitions that, and I was like playing around with, I guess like balancing pieces and yeah, playing with the space and placing them in precarious ways, which I've always found exciting. And then moving on to my time at Northern Clay, I really kind of continued to explore this building technique that I had just started using. And so the majority of my sculptures that I made at the Clay Center were kind of like constructed in this way. I like to think of it as my like little pancakes, little slabs that I make like between my hands, and then just like press them into the sculpture to like build up these walls. And you can kind of see from the bird's eye view there that all of the sculptures made in this way are hollow and they have pretty thin walls. And it's like a pretty, I found that it's like a durable sort of building technique that also allows for like a lot of movement within the pieces. And so I ended up making a bunch of like sort of individual sculptures in this way. And then post firing, I would just like discover like new ways that they could interact with each other and be stacked on top of each other and interlock in ways, and all like without adhesive or anything, hold it like just, I guess like physics holding them together. And so this big stacked image here is maybe the most risky of my stacking experience or experiments. And yeah, I've just found that this sort of like playing around with sculptures after they've been fired is super like exciting and really satisfying. And another sort of vein that I've worked in is, or I've over time I've just like collected a lot of like pieces that I had been working on that were either broken or I just like didn't like how they looked, or never finished them or something. And it sort of like led me to this thought that you know, if something if something breaks while I'm making it, it's like it's not a sad thing necessarily. It's like an opportunity to just like do something different with it. So I have these pieces that I just have like used epoxy and adhesives to build up these like funky structures, and have incorporated like a bunch of other materials like things that from the hardware store, like caulk and exterior foam and other materials. And that piece on the left there is in the gallery now, but it looks a little different because it has like a full coat of wood stain on it, which gives it like this nice like iridescent quality and makes it less like candy colored, I guess. And then it's like a final sort of, I guess, path of experimentation that I like went down during my residency, and especially after like once COVID hit, was just like digital editing of sculptures and like collaging sculptures with other images that I found compelling. And I kind of started to view this as like a data as glaze, or like a digital glaze or something. And yeah, I found that there's like infinite possibilities. This kind of like, it could go any way. Like once I upload an image into the software, the like image editing software, is like they could literally turn into anything. And I guess that's the same with my stacking processes. Like there are infinite ways that the sculptures could just like sit next to each other or on top of each other. And I mean, it's the same when we all just start out with a lump of clay. Like it can go like literally in any direction. So it's, yeah, just always exciting. And these are just a couple examples of other finished work that I made at Northern Clay Center last winter and fall mostly. And I like to think that these images just kind of, or these sculptures, they just like pause for a moment and like pose for a photo. And then after that, I feel like completely free to take them apart because they're not really connected. Like they're separate pieces, and they can live, have different lives, you know, after these images. So yeah, I'm just gonna like transition into this other local arts efforts that I was involved with over the summer. But I want to say thank you to everyone at Northern Clay. Thank you, Kyle. Thank you to all of the presenters. And yeah, so I just wanted to talk about like some arts classes and other happenings at the Seward Cafe, which is just down the street from the Northern Clay Center. And they were a restaurant that was collectively owned and operated, and they shut down with the beginning of the pandemic. And then with the murder of George Floyd and the uprisings, they basically like just sort of like a new collective was formed basically. There were like a lot of activists and like people working in food justice and things like that who came together. And so we had this like a free store basically, like distribution site where we had food and cleaning supplies and baby supplies for whoever needed them in the community. And that was like really the new sort of like business model that was established on top of this like worker-owned restaurant that was no longer like totally there. But and we got a lot of donations at the beginning of the summer to like get this going, and had fundraisers and grants. And alongside the free store, we formed like an arts committee basically, and we had this beautiful garden space available to us. And our goal was just to like offer free art classes or lessons to anyone who's like coming through the free store and getting goods. And so I ended up asking Northern Clay if we would be able to do like ceramics things there. And at the Seward Cafe, I mean, our budget for like, we wanted to offer free art classes, but we also just had, you know, our budget to do this was like $0. And it worked out great and just fine because the NCC outreach program is, you know, they help out with these like sorts of things often. And so we were able to get clay and glazes and firings. That way we could like facilitate these classes outdoors at this basically like new community hub that had popped up in the summer. And so here's some images of our like socially distanced clay setup. And then we had, this is a couple images of the class, and Chris Salas, who was in Mid-Nice program when I was a resident, taught the first couple of classes, which was really amazing. And then we had a couple of people from who were also working at our free store, who were potters and were able to come in and teach classes as well. And we also ended up getting a wheel donated to us from someone who was working in food justice and who, yeah, just like came into the space, and, you know, it was just a connection made. And here's some images of some of the work in process. And we've got some finished work here. And then we also, since we had the wheel and we had potters in the free store and the classes, we were able to make a bunch of bowls. And then we also asked NCC studio artists for some bowls for an Empty Bowls event. So if you're listening to this and you donate a bowl, thank you so much. We were able to raise a bunch of money for our free store. And since our arts classes aren't happening right now because it's cold out, but we hope to have them again when it warms up. And I mean, right now our free store food distribution efforts at the Seward Cafe are ongoing. They're just have shifted into delivering the goods directly to where people live in apartment buildings and things like that. But yeah, so I just wanted to thank the outreach program specifically. Thanks Allison and Bobby for firing all of our stuff. Yeah, and I got my website there and my Instagram handle, and thank you all.
All right. Thank you, Nat, as well. Make sure I get all my windows closed out the right way here. Okay. So before, if anyone was planning to dip out after the presentations, I just wanted to take a moment just to pause and say thank you to everyone who joined us this afternoon, early evening, to recognize and celebrate these artists. Thank you to the funders that helped make these opportunities available for NCC to be the steward of and to make it possible for these artists to have these advantages. And most of all, thank you to the artists for your incredible dedication and commitment to upholding the tenor of these awards. For your contributions to an absolutely incredible exhibition. When you see the space, you're going to be overwhelmed. It is fantastic. And also for coming or connecting with us live here tonight. So thank you to everybody for making all this happen. And at this point, I'd like to open the floor to anybody that has questions. We're going to try to roll through the chat here and read those that were typed in earlier. But if you have ones you'd like to ask, feel free to unmute your microphone and ask any of the artists a question you might have. Oops. Close that. I'm scrolling way to the top of the chat to read any of them that came in while the presentations were happening. I've got one question here for Chris. Marnie asking if you had worked with Sarah Hyman at Dartmouth.
I hadn't, but I did meet her when she was a McKnight artist here. She's absolutely wonderful. But I wasn't able to be a student of hers.
Okay. All right. Well, there's an incredible number of messages expressing love and support for all the artists that gave presentations tonight. But once again, please feel free to unmute yourself if you'd like to ask directly. Okay, well, I'm not going to hold anybody around too long. Don't want to let that silence get awkward. Like I mentioned earlier, these recordings they were streamed through Facebook. They're going to be taken down so we can edit them and put them onto our YouTube channel once everything's been cleaned up and all that. The exhibition will be posted on our website as a 3D virtual tour in the next week and a half, maybe 2 weeks. That timeline gets a little bit is flexible, I should say. But then, like I said, the exhibition you are able to walk through in person if you are near NCC, just in small groups. If you're separate households, two individuals at a time. So please just give our sales gallery a call. We can get you a scheduled time to come see the work in person. I highly recommend it if it's within driving distance. But once again, thank you to the artists, everyone that tuned into this presentation tonight. This is, I believe, a record attendance for one of these presentations. So thank you all, and
hope you enjoy the evening and weekend ahead.
Hey, Kyle, I have a really quick question. Debbie Schumer.
Absolutely.
I'm wondering about the deadline. It looks like there's a lot of artists on this call, and maybe this would be a good time to talk about deadline for the next series of emerging artists, or is it past?
No, I can get that answer for you in just a moment. I know I did talk about this. I did talk about this at the beginning. I am the resource and the contact for anything artist services. So if you've got questions about these awards, the application process, the components, what you might be eligible for, please feel free to reach out to me. My name is Kyle Rudy Polip, and my contact information is on the website. Sorry.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you.
A very lengthy file path to get there, but for this grant application cycle, the Emerging Artist Awards, the portal itself is set to open on February 12th, and the application deadline is April 9th at 5 p.m. And if there's anyone who's at that mid-career stage for the McKnight Fellowships, that is for Minnesota artists, in addition to the McKnight Residency program, which is for non-Minnesota mid-career artists, that portal will open on March 19th, and the application deadline is May 21st at 5 o'clock p.m.
Great, thank you.
Certainly.
Kyle?
Yes.
Ron Levy here. Just a quick observation, having not been out much during pandemic times. It would be interesting for the artist to have them give some concept of the scale of their pieces. Looking at them online, I have no idea how large or small these pieces are. And for putting stuff online, it might be interesting to those of us who aren't particularly familiar with the artist to learn.
I think I caught most of it. Some of your question was a little hard to understand, but I believe you were asking about the scale of. I think I caught Emily's work was the question. From what I've seen, the jars themselves are about 13 inches tall. The large cylindrical jars, and some of the other pieces. I think this microphone will pick up if Emily would like to step over for a moment and speak to the scale.
Kyle, I'm back here. It was just for upcoming, when you present stuff online, it would be interesting to know the size of everyone's pieces, not being familiar with a lot of the artist's work.
Got it. Sorry, like I said, the connection was a little tricky, but that is a note I will definitely make. Thank you so much for the suggestion. All right. Any other lingering questions out there from anybody? All right. Well, I will once again say thank you to everyone for tuning in, the artists, the staff that are installing or that have the show installed. I hope you have a wonderful weekend. And like I said, stop by soon. We're here from 10 a.m. to 5 p.m. 5 days a week, or sorry, 7 days a week. 10 to 5, 7 days a week in the exhibition space at Northern Clay Center. So please stop by. All right. Thank you.